Jason, could you show us a little bit your Google template?
Yeah, no problem. So this is the template that I used for my final exam for my nurses. So this was a final exam that I wrote for second semester first year students in the nursing program. And what I've done is it's a final exam that's worth 100 points. So you can disregard the number of points up here. What I've done is I've just populated my sections with actual individual questions, so that as I'm writing my draft of my exam, I typically write it in a Google Doc or like a Word document, and copying and pasting questions into Google Quiz is fairly easy. So as an example, if you're wanting to transfer your multiple choice questions from your Word document onto Google Quiz, you can actually just highlight the stem, copy and paste, and if the options for your answer for your multiple choice question are exist on separate lines, like you've made them into new paragraphs, you can simply highlight every single line and then copy and paste it into Google Quiz, and it'll set it up as individual options. So it's fairly easy to do. I've divided these things up into separate sections, so students literally have to click the next button. It acts kind of like a page of an exam, like the separate pages of a paper exam. So generally the way that I've set it up is there are 10 questions per section. I ask Google Quiz to randomize the questions in every section. There's options like this, like at the top here. I can actually take a look to see what my students can actually see once I've prepared the final document. So if I click the preview, I'll know if the exam can be opened, if it's closed, and generally, once the students start answering the exam, I'll get a lot of my responses in this page. Right now, the exam's not accepting any responses. So even if I provide the link for this exam to my students, they'll click it open and they'll see something that says, this exam will open at 9 o'clock, Thursday, May 28th. So at the very least, and I really, really like this option, because if I send them this link in an email, they have that email or MIO, and they'll know exactly where to go for the final exam at the scheduled time. And they won't be able to see the questions yet until I open them physically. So I really like that option. I think it kind of eases a lot of the tension, because some students have difficulty finding out where to go. And once answers come pouring in, I'll know exactly the percentage of people who got things right or wrong. It helps me understand which questions were too difficult, and I can drop certain questions if I want, like we all do that. Another interesting thing is I can provide my Google Quiz with two separate names. So for example, the name in the top left corner is the file name. So I can give this name, or this final exam, a name like Final Exam Version 1. Whereas students won't actually see the file name, they'll just see the name of the actual evaluation. So that's kind of fun. But generally, a lot of these things that you see can be moved around like willy-nilly. So if you're trying to you can make different versions based on just shuffling questions around in different sections. So they do actually see questions in different orders. I have sections here for true and false statements. You can provide different points to different questions depending on the type of question. So for example here, what I'll do is I'll have a statement. They just have to answer if it's true or false. If it's false, they correct the statement to make it true. I can make it so that they don't see the point value, because false statements are going to be worth more than true statements.
Could you just talk about that a little bit more? So like the multiple choice, Google, you identify which answer is correct, and Google Forms or Google Quiz will be able to grade that, like, automatically. But how do these work exactly? And then how, like, do you have to go through it? Do you have is it automatic? How do you?
So the multiple choice.
How can you grade that?
Yeah, those are automatically graded. I think those are pretty easy to grade. Generally, for short answer questions, if I ask students to put in true or false, I have to put in the separate permutations of how they're going to answer these things. So some students are going to write the full word true. Some of them are going to be capitalized. Other people are not going to capitalize. Some people add a period at the end of a word, right? So at this time, I kind of understand kind of how my students are going to be writing their responses, so I can actually put those in. And as long as their answers are identical to what I put in, Google will actually give the grade. However, if it's anything different, then they won't get the grade. So at the end, what I can do is I'll go to my response tab, and I'll have three different things. I'll have a summary that gives me the grade of every single student. Then I can look at individual questions, or I can look at an individual's exam or assessment. So usually what I like to do is I'll go through manually through all the things that are written. So short answer questions, long answer questions, I'll go through them manually just to see if points were correctly awarded. And what's really cool is I can actually do one question at a time. So I'll choose the question, and then I'll get all of my response, and I can just go through them and just tick to see who got it right, who got it wrong, and then move on to the next question. And it goes by pretty fast. Honestly, like grading these questions or grading Google Quiz has been a lot faster than obviously grading things on paper. You could add feedback. You can add your rubrics directly to the feedback as well, so it's easier to refer to. If you give the assessment back to the students, which is something that I don't normally do, if students want to see their final exam, we make appointments one-on-one to review everything. But there are, under certain circumstances, I do give back assessments, and I can provide the rubric or a typical answer or how I awarded points in either feedback or my answer key. Like there's a lot of options there. You can provide links to websites if students have difficulty with a certain topic. You also have the opportunity to provide a YouTube video in as feedback instead of actually written feedback. And if you take a look at the options here, you have things like you can collect the email addresses. Generally, students are gonna need a Gmail account to access a Google quiz that is collecting email addresses. Obviously, as teachers, this is something that you're gonna have to click on because you need to know exactly who's writing the test. For me, I have these two separate options here because I'm using Google Classroom, and John Abbott has provided my students with Gmail accounts with a John Abbott College domain name. So I get to restrict users to that organization, and I can limit their response to one. Presentation format, progress bars, shuffling question order, and then obviously you can make the Google form into a Google quiz by clicking this link right here. And then it has a few options here for immediately grading an assessment and providing the students with their grade. Or you can click this for manual review later if you need to correct any short answer or long answer questions. And then I get to click or unclick what the students can see. So for example, my true or false questions, true statements are going to be worth 1 point. False statements are worth 2 because identifying the statement as false is 1 point, and then correcting it is the second point. And so I want to hide point values for my true and false statements because if the students know how much the question is worth, they can discern if it's true or false. So you can take that off, and yeah, I think what's really fun about using Google Quiz is just the amount of just how versatile it is, and just the things that you can do with it, and just moving things around physically, I think is pretty helpful as a teacher in shaping and constructing an assessment.
I just have a question because I've used Google Forms for giving assessments in the past, and actually I did a Profweb real life story with Brian a few years ago
Awesome.
using the branching feature.
Okay.
Meaning that if students get it wrong, then it can branch to different questions, or branch actually to the same question so they can re-answer it. I don't know if you've investigated that at all, but it's more for like a formative like exercise, because they can just keep on retrying until they get the right answer. The way I was implementing it was they get it right on the first go, then they get a certain grade, and then that grade goes down for each attempt.
I've been fairly conservative with the way that I use Google Quiz. And whenever these really cool things are mentioned to me about like the capabilities of Google Quiz, I'm like, oh man, I had no idea. Just because the way that I use it is almost almost identical to what you would typically see on a paper exam, anyways. And I kind of attribute that to, I guess, my need to like normalize the transition to online to the online learning environment. But I think that's another thing I should probably take a look into over the summer, is just seeing exactly what I can do with Google Quiz, especially for formal assessments. I think that would just be, or formative assessments, sorry. There's just a lot here that I don't know about, and I could probably just work on expanding that a little bit more.
Yeah, certainly digital versions of things open up all sorts of new opportunities depending on what options are there. So thanks for sharing with us, Jason, the use of Google Quiz for evaluations.
Yeah, great. My pleasure.